people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
News.
Well, Savannah Marshall just got dog walked by Clarissa Shields at 160. I became 168 super middle. I'm the WBC world champion, silver world champion.
Correct.
I was mandated. So you mean to tell me because of the UK standing on Savannah Marshall and the money suffice, right? That you would go and give Savannah Marshall an opportunity after she just lost to Clarissa Shields at 160? In what world are we talking about that somebody from a lower weight class deserves the opportunity at 168 where I'm mandated? So you would pass me up to go and fight in the UK against a woman who just lost to Clarissa Shields? It makes no sense, but besides financial. Not only did you pretend to not know me, to not have sparred with me, and I have all the proof. I could literally go on for days exposing her. But what Savannah Marshall deserves, like, she makes it seem like you're coming back and getting a shot at the titles. You gave her a shot at the titles. You went and picked her.
Crews-Dezurn very recently sat down with Sportbox TV official here on YouTube, describing the situation, how the Marshall versus Franchon Cruz fight came into being.
You know, most people will forget that immediately after the fight, Franchon was ringside,
Campaigning for a fight with Savannah Marshall immediately after the Shields fight.
She wanted to fight Savannah.
Now she's going to. But very recently at the kickoff press conference for the fight, Franchon Cruz was singing a very different tune, claiming that Savannah Marshall was being coddled, that, she loses a fight with Shields at 160 pounds for undisputed, only for her to be afforded an opportunity at 168.
For undisputed.
And on this premise, she claimed that Savannah's being coddled.
We fight for two different things. Because for me, even when I win, I lose. When you lose, you get babysat. You get pushed. Oh, I get another opportunity. I want the rematch. Nah, like this title, like the posters say, all or nothing. You ain't got nothing. I got it all, and I'm gonna keep it.
At the kickoff press conference for their fight a little over a week ago, Franchon Cruz claimed that Savannah Marshall is being coddled, as if to say she's being afforded an opportunity that she hasn't earned, that she doesn't deserve. I mean, that was the feeling.
That's what Cruz-Dezurn is talking about.
Cruz-Dezurn, who, before this fight with Savannah was even announced, before it was finalized, hell, likely before it even started getting worked on, Cruz-Dezurn was calling for a fight with Franchon Cruz.
Months ago.
And Franchon didn't want to give her the time of day. But by all rights, she did want to give Savannah Marshall the time of day, because we don't get here
unless Franchon wants us to.
Savannah Marshall's not the mandatory challenger for any of Franchon Cruz's alphabet titles. Cruz-Dezurn is.
And when the WBC very recently ordered the fight between Franchon and Cruz-Dezurn,
which fight did Franchon go ahead with? She went ahead with the Marshall fight.
So this idea that Savannah Marshall is somehow being coddled, well, who's coddling her, if not Franchon Cruz? This is a voluntary title defense, not a mandatory title defense. You never had to fight her. You chose to fight her.
You wanted to fight her. In fact, you've wanted to fight her for a while. Immediately after she lost to Clarissa Shields, it was Franchon Cruz ringside campaigning for a fight with Savannah.
And she literally posted it to her social media. She volunteered to give Savannah a shot.
So that when you do the fight with Savannah, you can propagate this narrative that somehow she's being coddled.
Just call it what it is. You wanted to get at some of that Sky Sports money.
You know that Savannah has a network behind her, and Cruz-Dezurn doesn't. You know that Sky Sports is willing to pay to play for their fighter, and that's what you wanted.
We don't get here without your participation, your approval.
You wanted this. just as much as Savannah. And I think that's what Jadeja Green is talking about. Jadeja Green, who, one way or another, one of these fighters, they're going to have to answer to her.
Which is why I'm not up in arms about the whole thing. I love Savannah Marshall versus Franchon Crews as a fight just as much as I love Jadeja Green versus any one of them. It's a great sequence of fights that this division sorely needs. It needs the who's who fighters, the talented fighters, to fight each other.
The talent pool at super middleweight isn't as deep as it is in other divisions. Thus, the good fighters, the really good ones, they can't afford to stay away from each other. They can't afford to avoid each other. They have to fight in order to raise their own profiles and the profile of the division as a whole.
So I'm not against any of this. I just think it is hypocritical of Franchon to claim that Savannah's being coddled.
By who?
Must be you, since you're the one giving her the title shot. She don't get a title shot unless you afford her one. She's not your mandatory. You wanted to fight her.
More than you wanted to fight Jadeja Green. You claim that you and Savannah are fighting for two different things. You're fighting for money just as much as she is.
So get off your high horse.
That's what I think Jadeja Green is saying. I think that's what she means. She's calling Franchon a hypocrite.
No shortage of those in the sport of boxing.
Spare me the I came up the hard way, road less traveled bit. Spare me the Savannah Marshall doesn't deserve a shot at Undisputed when you're the one giving it to her, and you never had to.
If you really wanted to stand on principle, you could have walked away from that and fought Jadeja.
You fly across the Atlantic Ocean, you do the press conference, you misrepresent the entire situation.
To communicate what?
What?
That Savannah Marshall's got it easy? How is it easy? Going from a Clarissa Shields fight into a Franchon Crews fight. Many would say that's a very difficult sequence of fights.
Nothing easy about that. Savannah Marshall had the option of fighting some nondescript journeywoman for her rebound fight after her first loss.
She wanted to fight you, and you wanted to oblige her.
So let's can the altruism here, right?
Right.
You're a prize fighter, she's a prize fighter. And she's capitalizing on an opportunity that you're giving her.
Because the truth is, it's just as much an opportunity for you as it is for her.
In other news, iconoclast Mike Tyson says Gervonta Davis is the face of boxing, will have the biggest drawing power. Many of you will already know that I take issue with these comments and I don't agree with him because you don't suddenly become the face of boxing because of one big fight you were in.
Especially when you had help.
Mike stated, he being Gervonta Davis, is truly right. He is the face of boxing, Tyson said to Forbes. But that's because Ryan Garcia is the draw, and that makes Garcia the face of boxing because of the amount of people that he fills an arena. Since that fight, Ryan Garcia's fans turned into Tank's fans, and Davis is going to have the biggest drawing power, I believe. Ryan brought those people out, and normally, when the draw gets beaten, like Ryan, when he gets beaten, the people that are his fans are now Tank's fans.
That's not how this works.
When Floyd Mayweather beat Oscar De La Hoya, Oscar De La Hoya's fans didn't turn into Floyd Mayweather's fans, quite the opposite. They hated him even more for having beaten Oscar.
That's not how this works.
It was the same with Canelo. It was the same with Cotto. It was the same with Manny Pacquiao. When Floyd Mayweather decisioned Manny Pacquiao, you'd think those Pacquiao fans became Mayweather fans after that?
That's not how this works.
It's not how this works. And Gervonta Davis having beaten Ryan Garcia doesn't mean that all those folks that showed up and showed out to support Ryan are going to suddenly show up and show out to support Gervonta.
It's not how this works.
Devin Haney, the undisputed world champion at lightweight, will return on May 20th in a very important title defense against three-division world champion Vasyl Lomachenko. It's a great possibility that Tank Davis could go undefeated his whole career. But then you've got Devin Haney and Shakur, said Tyson. Those guys are very good. Those are the only two guys who are possibly a threat to him. I know they've boxed before, and some people got the advantage over others in sparring, but sparring's not like fighting. For some reason, people don't fight as hard as they spar, or some people don't train as hard as they fight. It's just a strange dynamic in that.
Listen, Mike's a great guy. I fucking love him. But I don't agree with all his boxing takes. I mean, for starters, he picked Manny Pacquiao to beat Floyd Mayweather.
I didn't agree with him then when it came to that, and I don't agree with him here today when it comes to this.
Gervonta Davis is not the face of boxing.
I don't know if he one day will go on to become the face of boxing. I just know that here today, that's not who and what he is. Not based on one successful fight with Ryan Garcia that Ryan helped himself. He's not the face of boxing. You know who is?
Canelo.
Becoming the face of boxing is more of a marathon than a sprint. It's not something that suddenly happens or happens overnight just because you were in one big fight, one very big fight, one commercially successful fight. It doesn't happen that way.
You could argue that this was Gervonta Davis's first big fight, his very first big fight in his entire career, because in spite of having been on pay-per-view 5 times,
those box office fights weren't big fights. There were bigger, much bigger fights happening at or around the same time as those fights. For starters, Wilder versus Fury, 2 and 3. Those were bigger fights than any of Gervonta Davis's fights. Canelo Alvarez versus Caleb Plant, Canelo Alvarez versus Dmitry Bivol, or Gennady Golovkin for a third time.
those were all bigger fights than any of Gervonta Davis's fights.
They did better at the box office and better at the gate than any of Gervonta Davis's fights at that time.
Just because those fights that Gervonta had were on pay-per-view didn't make them big fights. And just because he sold over 1 million with Ryan not that long ago, that doesn't mean he's the face of boxing. He's not even the top earning boxer in the sport.
He's the face of boxing because he was in a pay-per-view that sold over 1 million. Canelo Alvarez has been there and done that several times, way more than Gervonta.
Canelo Alvarez, unlike Gervonta Davis, he cracked the Forbes list as one of the highest paid athletes in the year of 2023.
Becoming the face of boxing is not some ethereal title that doesn't have parameters or some kind of meaning. Oftentimes, the face of boxing is
Synonymous with being the highest earning boxer.
Canelo Alvarez's name is ranked among other athletes like LeBron James and Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant.
But you don't see Gervonta Davis's name anywhere in there because he's not the face of boxing.
The face of boxing is synonymous with being the highest earning boxer, and that's not Gervonta Davis. Now, there is a credible argument that Anthony Joshua might be one of the faces of boxing because what he gets paid for a fight.
Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk, the kind of money that these guys have already made for their previous fights.
They're in that conversation, at least more than Gervonta Davis is.
Look at what the Saudis are prepared to pay these guys to have a heavyweight showdown, a monster mash, towards the end of this year. An estimated $400 million in guaranteed purses.
Raw numbers. For a perspective, here are some raw numbers. 1.2 million pay-per-views sold at a price point of $85. Let's call it $85. That comes out to about $102 million
Now, you don't think Gervonta Davis is taking all of that home, do you?
He isn't. But any one of the 4 men set to participate in that heavyweight showdown in Saudi, if they get it over the line, any one of those guys stands to make close to $100 million by themselves.
Gervonta Davis don't make that kind of money.
He doesn't make the kind of money that those heavyweights make, and he doesn't make the kind of money that Canelo Alvarez makes. Not here, not anywhere, because he's not the face of boxing.
You offended? You don't like that?
I don't fucking care. Am I supposed to coddle your fragile ego?
Fuck you and your ego.
You think I give 2 furry flamingo-shaped fucks that you used to live down the street from Gervonta Davis, so you sat next to him in homeroom?
I don't fucking care.
Facts don't give a fuck about your feelings, and I'm just sticking to the facts. And based on what the facts are, Gervonta Davis, in spite of participating in a very successful pay-per-view, he isn't the face of boxing.
No matter how bad you want him to be.
This weekend, the real face of boxing is set to return to action. Opposite the ring is mandatory challenger by way of the WBO, John Ryder. I don't anticipate that the box office numbers for this fight are going to come close to the Davis versus Garcia fight. I don't. And then you ask yourself, well, if that's how you feel, how is Canelo the face of boxing?
I think the fight does, I don't know, at or around 400, maybe 500,000 pay-per-view buys.
You ask yourself, well, if that's what you think it's going to do, how is Canelo the face of boxing? That's substantially less than Gervonta Davis sold with Ryan Garcia. And it's because he had Ryan Garcia. He had Ryan Garcia to help him. Whatever this weekend's fight does, it'll do that off Canelo's name alone.
Whereas what Gervonta Davis did with Ryan, he did with Ryan's help.
The more accurate gauge for Gervonta Davis's drawing power will be if he decides to fight Isaac Cruz again. His longtime trainer, Calvin Ford, has been doing the rounds.
Yeah.
And he's really promoting this thing.
Yeah.
He said in plain English he wants to revisit that fight to quote-unquote end the controversy.
What controversy?
Manufactured one. Seems to me he's just looking for an excuse to revisit a fight that his fighter already won, because if he fights him again, at least this time he won't be in unfamiliar territory. He's more receptive to putting Gervonta in there with Isaac again than the winner of Haney versus Lomachenko or Shakur Stevenson.
He wants to skip out on those guys so Gervonta can fight this guy again. And the hope is that this time, in this rematch, it'll sell more than the first fight did.
And it probably would, because the bar is set exceptionally low for Gervonta and Isaac's first meeting. Don't forget that Isaac was a late replacement. Nobody knew him.
He was standing in for Rolly.
Rolly was having some sexual misconduct issues that have since been sorted out. Better still, Isaac was standing in for Rolly. And that pay-per-view...
He was a late replacement, an unheralded one, a nondescript opponent that added no value to the show.
Now, since then, they've gotten to know Isaac a little better, and Gervonta Davis, he's on the heels of this commercially successful fight with Ryan, this quote-unquote big win. The hope is that an Isaac-Cruz rematch will sell more than the first fight did, and it probably will.
But that's because the bar is set so low.
Canelo's fighting this weekend. I don't anticipate he comes close to 1 million pay-per-view buys like the Davis versus Garcia fight did. I don't think he will.
Not with this fight.
But that exact same principle applies to a Davis versus Cruz rematch, a Davis versus Cruz sequel. I don't think for a second Gervonta Davis can do with Isaac Cruz what he did with Ryan Garcia. In fact, I'll go as far as saying that Davis versus Cruz II will sell less pay-per-view buys
than Canelo versus Ryder.
If I had to guess, I'd say Canelo versus Ryder does something in the neighborhood of 400 to 500,000 pay-per-view buys, whereas Davis versus Cruz?
I'd say that does somewhere in the neighborhood of 225 to 250,000 pay-per-view buys.
Better than their first fight did, yes, but still not on par with what Canelo does.
Like what he did with Dimitri Bivol, a little over 500,000 pay-per-view buys sold, just north of 500,000. That's what Canelo can do without a high-profile dance partner.
Now, can Gervonta Davis do that? I don't think so. Not with an Isaac Cruz rematch or a Rolly Romero rematch, no.
Maybe with a Devin Haney. Maybe with a Shakur Stevenson.
Maybe with a Teofimo Lopez, if Teofimo Lopez beats Josh Taylor. Maybe with them. But not with an Isaac Cruz again, and not with a Rolly.
Because you're not the face of boxing.
Coincidentally, these are not the fighters that Calvin Ford is talking about for Gervonta Davis's next fight. These aren't the guys he's looking to match his guy with. He's looking to match him against Isaac Cruz. So I'm telling you, the numbers for Davis versus Cruz II will likely fall below the numbers for Canelo versus Ryder.
Accenting that Gervonta Davis is not the face of boxing.
Look at what he's telling these guys. He's saying Shakur's on the radar, Lomachenko's on the radar, Devin Haney is on the radar, but they've got to get their numbers up.
Does it sound like he's about to do a fight with one of those guys?
Does it sound like Calvin Ford is pursuing one? Or does it sound like he's looking for an excuse to revisit a fight with a fighter that his fighter already beat?
What do you get out of fighting Isaac Cruz again?
You get to play it safe, because Shakur Stevenson, Devin Haney, or Vasyl Lomachenko, if he wins, they pose more of a challenge and more of a threat to Gervonta than Isaac does.
With Isaac, you've been there and done that. You beat him before.
You're not in unfamiliar territory, but with these guys you would be, and they know that.
The boxing community at large is not clamoring for a rematch with Isaac Cruz. They're not asking you to fight that guy again. Who they are asking you to fight is either Shakur Stevenson or the winner of Haney versus Lomachenko.
They're not asking you to fight Isaac again. In fact, they were never asking you to fight Isaac. They didn't ask you to fight him the first time, and they're not asking you to have a rematch with him.
So you go ahead and you do that rematch, or you do a rematch with Rolly, whichever comes first.
And those numbers, what that fight generates, will be a far cry from what he just did with Ryan Garcia, because Ryan added that value to the show, and they don't.
And that's reality.